Well, nice to have you with us as we kick over broadcast day here on Mad Dog Unleashed on this Wednesday here on the great Sirius XM 82. Good to have you aboard. 888 Mad Dog 6, two-way sports talk telephone number as we talk to you about what's going on as far as the world of competition is concerned with Colin Schmeling and Eddie Erickson and Bill Zimmerman. He is still here. And Steve Torrey, who has managed to last another day. We'll get to all the contests, all the decisions. That is a little later in our program here this afternoon. We'll take the contest and we'll get going with it at 4 o'clock. On this Wednesday show. We'll get some Hall of Fame stuff in here early. We'll do a little Hall of Fame late. Here until 7. 888 Mad Dog 6, your two-way sports talk telephone number, Eastern Time 7, as we chat to you about what's cooking in the world of sports. And we'll start with the Hall of Fame. Big announcement today. Got a couple things to say about it. Number one, like the NFL draft, how would you like to be covering or follow the NFL draft, and on Wednesday before the draft, you knew the first round just from, general managers anonymously telling you who they're going to take, the player agents saying, quietly telling writers, I made a deal with this team at this pick. You'd hate it, right? Because then when the draft came on Thursday night at 6 o'clock, or 8 o'clock, when Goodell is saying, welcome to the 2018 NFL Draft with the first pick the Cleveland Browns take. Well, if you knew the team or the player that the Browns would take, and you knew it 24 hours in advance, you say to yourself, geez, this is not as suspenseful as I would like it to be. And the writers have finally gotten around, the Adam Schefters of the world have finally realized, and the directors and the producers of the, these television shows around the draft have finally realized, don't break the draft positioning and the draft pick taken 10 minutes before Goodell is going to announce it anyway. It ruins the suspense. Well, in a lot of ways, that's what's happened with the Baseball Hall of Fame announcement. It's at 6 o'clock tonight. The MLB Network will have it live at 6. And, everybody knows 57% of the ballots have been already calculated by these Ryan Thibodeau, who's some online guy who calculates all the votes and everything else. And, based on that, you get a little sense of who's going to make the Hall of Fame and who we're basically wasting our time chirping about. The Larry Walkers of the world, Scott Rowlands of the world, for instance. And so it loses a lot of suspense by showtime tonight at 6 o'clock. Wouldn't you like to be in a little bit of a simpler time when you can put the thing on tonight at 6 o'clock or whatever the day may be and not have any idea? Well, you figured that Tomey and you figured that Chipper and Guerrero would be in the Hall of Fame, but you wouldn't know about Hoffman or about Edgar or about anybody else, Mussina. And you can watch it with some suspense and really enjoy your television. Well, you can't do that with the Hall of Fame. I mean, they ruin it by telling you who everybody loves way before the ballots on the announcement is made at 6 o'clock tonight. That drives me crazy. That's the first thing. Second thing is, and I know a lot of people disagree with this. Before I tell you my ballot, a lot of people disagree with this, but I hate the way they do it. The New York Post has got 11 writers who vote on the Hall of Fame. There is no newspaper in America. New York Times does not allow their writers to vote, so none there. LA Times, same thing. Washington Post, same thing. I mean, the New York Post, which never covers a divisional series unless it's in Boston, never covered a divisional series outside of the Yankees or the Mets when they got to send it right out on the road and cost them money. The New York Post now, 11 writers, and it's not just them, I'm just using them as an example. 11 writers voting for the Hall of Fame. Guys who have been doing a hockey beat for about 30 years got a Hall of Fame ballot. I mean, that's ridiculous. That is absolutely absurd. Now, there's 420 some odd writers who vote. You got to get 75% of the vote. It used to be over 500, so you can make the argument that the Cooperstown has realized that it's been a little too wieldy, and they've narrowed it a little bit some. But to me, if it was my Hall of Fame, you know what I'm going to do? Every newspaper in the country that covers baseball, and it doesn't have to be in a baseball city. Obviously, I wouldn't want it to be. While the award votes to Cy Young, the MVPs, is in baseball towns. Every newspaper in the country, because it's a baseball writers award, and it's newspapers, get 2 votes. So the New York Post gets 2 votes. What they do, or 2 ballots, what they do with those ballots is up to them. If they want to give them to a columnist and a beat writer, and then they want to rotate it the next year, I'm okay with it. They should get 2. That's all they should get. I mean, they should not get 11 to divvy up amongst the staff like it's Halloween and they're picking out, corn candy. I mean, it's the dumbest thing I've ever seen in my life. I don't understand that. That, to me, I find mind-boggling. The New York Post does not have 11 writers on staff who cover baseball. They might have a guy who, runs out to Shea when everybody else is off and does a day game against the Padres in July, but that's not covering baseball. So from that perspective, I think the voting process is silly. So that's the second thing I wanted to get across here today. The third thing is, and my ballot is never going to change if I had one, I am not voting, and I know the younger writer doesn't care. They were in middle school when Bonds and Clemens and, Sosa and all these great players, home run hitters, were breaking records. And they now have the votes, so they could care less about the steroid era. But if I did have a vote, the steroid guys are not going to get it. That's as simple as that. I am not ever going to vote for Bonds. I'm never going to vote for Clemens, McGuire, Sosa. Now, I wouldn't have voted for Pudge because I think he did steroids. I wouldn't have voted for Piazza because I think he did steroids. And I probably wouldn't have voted for Bagwell because I think he did steroids. So those three wouldn't even been a Hall of Fame if I had a vote. And if I think there is suspicion about you doing steroids, whether it's in the Mitchell report, which is not suspicion, whether it's just in hearsay, whether it is based on numbers where you hit 3 home runs in 6 minor league seasons and then all of a sudden broke into the big leagues and hit 40, which makes no sense, I am going to have, back in that era when there was no testing, where you really could take anything, I'm going to have a major problem voting for you in the Hall of Fame. So if there is any tint of suspicion, you are not getting my vote. And don't let me hear that that's not fair. This is not a court of law. I am not throwing you in jail and disposing of the key for the next 5-10 years. Okay? This is a privilege. The Hall of Fame is that is a hallowed ground as far as I'm concerned. And I am not going to put anybody in there because, so what? He did steroids. He hit 660 some odd home runs. I'm not doing it. So from that standpoint, I'm going to be a tricky spot from that. I'm going to be very difficult with the steroid guys. To me, they ruin the record books. They overshadowed the guys who did it cleanly, a la McGriff. You don't think McGriff has been hurt? The fact that Bonds hit 762 home runs and he hit 493 in essentially the same period of time from a Hall of Fame perspective? You don't think he's been overshadowed by Bonds? Are you crazy? Of course he has. And all the other guys within 1 million home runs. So from that perspective, they are never getting my vote. They made a sham of the record books. And I know the argument about how Clemens and Bonds are Hall of Famers prior to steroids. I've heard that 1 million times. But they are not getting my vote. Simple. And if they want to yell at me and scream at me and call me a no good son of a gun, go ahead. I am not a member of a jury who is throwing somebody in jail for life on circumstantial evidence. All right. I have circumstantial evidence, and what I'm going to do with it, I have more than circumstantial with Bonds and Clemens, but I do on other circumstantial evidence, and I'm going to use my good common sense. And what I'm going to do with it is the only thing I can do with it is I'm going to withhold my vote. It's as simple as that. You're going to have to live with it. So Bonds, Clemens, everybody else who's tanning with it are not getting my vote. That's the third thing. Fourth thing, I'm a small room guy. Okay, there are too many people who have made the Hall of Fame into a big room now instead of a small room, and have made it a Hall of the very good instead of the Hall of the great. And the Hall of Fame is a tremendous honor. It's the best Hall of Fame in sport. It's much better than football that has the minimum requirement of 6 entries every year. It is better than the NBA, which combines it with college. It is by far the best Hall of Fame. And there are a lot of people, it's better. So there is two. Now, I think the actual process might be better with the football. There's 43 people, 46 riders. It's not 100 million of them, and away they go. And they narrow it down. In baseball, it's the most legitimate Hall of Fame. It's the sport, the most history to it, and to me, it means the most. But I am a big room guy. Hall of Fame means great. It means exceptional. It means immortality. That's what it means. It does not mean the Hall of Fame of the very good. It does not mean let's put everybody in. And it's been going on forever. Connie Mack put all his buddies in the late 40s. So I don't want to make this out to be just a latter day occurrence. This has been going on in the Hall of Fame for a long time. And to see where the fine line is very tricky. This just did not start in 2008. I mean, this has been going on for a long time, where a lot of people were voted in. Look at Mazzarella. Mazeroski. He's a perfect example because John Brown, his GM, was a Joe Brown. Whatever his name was on the executive committee, and they wanted to be nice to him, and they put him in the Hall of Fame. Now, Bill Mazeroski should buy a ticket. Nice moment, Game 7, but he's not a Hall of Famer. I am a small room guy, which makes my list a lot smaller than everybody else's. And number 2, I think that for the most part, and there are borderline cases, so don't get me wrong, but for the most part, you know a Hall of Famer when you see it. You don't need to look at the back of his baseball card. You don't need to, fine-tune the numbers and look at the WAR and all the statistical nonsense and the babble that has come across here in the last, whatever it might be, 15, 20 years. When you see a Hall of Famer as a baseball fan, you know a Hall of Famer, right? I'm sure the folks who saw Mays in the 50s and the 60s did not have to think twice about putting Willie Mays in the Hall of Fame. And I can say that about a million guys that I have seen. Chipper Jones was a Hall of Famer. Case closed, and all the way around it. He was a great, great player. Now, I know there are some borderline cases where a little more careful study needs to be in play. I'll buy that. But for the most part, the Hall of Fame should be, I like the eye test more than anything else. Now, again, there are borderline cases. So sometimes you got to determine where you stand. Now, I like bold type on the back of the baseball card where he led the league in a particular category. I would love to see in a 15-year career. Most Hall of Fame careers last, 12 to 15 years, whatever the case might be. I would like to see somebody who wants to be a Hall of Famer be the best player in his sport, whether it's a Cy Young or an MVP, sometime in that 15-year period. And I don't think that's asking for too much. If I'm going to put a guy in the Hall of Fame, immortality, wouldn't it be fair to ask that person, pitcher or hitter, to at least once in his career that is now deemed Hall of Fame worthy, to be the best at his position in that season, whether he be the best pitcher, the best offensive player, or just the best MVP? Wouldn't that be fair? Now, again, extenuating circumstances. Martinez, Randy Johnson could dominate the pitching statistics. Bonds could dominate the hitting. I get that. But for the most part, I don't think that's asking for too much. So those are my parameters of where we begin. Now, you can vote for as many as 10, which I never would do. There's not 10 Hall of Famers in the Hall of Fame. There's not 10 guys who are Hall of Fame baseball players this year. I would vote for 6. Listen, I don't love Tommy necessarily. He's a one-dimensional player, but he did hit 612 home runs. He is not a guy that has any tint of steroid use. He's not in any report. There's no rumors. He didn't gain 100 pounds. He didn't shrink when his career is over. Jim Thome is Jim Thome. 612 is 612. He hit that many home runs, and I know the home run era is over now as far as what it means, but if you hit that many, you should be in Hall of Fame. That's one. Chipper Jones is a no-brainer. He hit 300 from both sides of the plate. He won an MVP. He was the offensive poster boy. The pitching was the poster boys, but he was the offensive poster boy of a team that won, 13 or 14 divisional championships in a row. Now, he wasn't part of all of them. He came up in the mid-90s, but Chipper Jones was a hell of a player, a very good offensive player, a good hitter, 3 and 4 in that lineup forever. An adequate defensive third baseman, all on one team. That's a no-brainer. That is number 2. Number 3, and I'm shocked he didn't get in last year, I would give an easy ballot to Vladimir Guerrero. Guerrero won an MVP, and Guerrero was a dominant player for the Montreal Expos. I didn't see him as much with the Angels. He didn't have as long a career with the Angels as he did with Montreal. He had a couple of really good years with the Angels. He kind of faded, went to Texas, faded, like they all do. Hung around a little too long, but Guerrero is a lifetime 3-something hitter. He is a tremendous, tremendous hitter. And Guerrero, I'm going to give you Guerrero real quick, and I am stunned. 318 lifetime batting average. I think there's only 4 or 5 players in baseball who have his numbers, and all of them are in the Hall of Fame. Guerrero, if you look at Guerrero is a 9-time All-Star. He won an MVP with the Angels. He had 10 seasons, finished top 4 3 other times. He won 10 seasons of 100 or more RBIs. He's got multiple 30-homer, 30 stolen base seasons. Only 13 players in history of the sport have done that. He is 5th all-time in the expansion era with the career batting average. He trails Gwynn, Boggs, Carew, and Puckett. And every player with a career .318 average with 5,000 plate appearances to play since World War II, is a Hall of Famer. He's got 9,000 plate appearances and he hit .318. The others on that list, Williams, Gwynn, Boggs, Carew, Musial, and Puckett. He's also got 449 career home runs, and he's the fifth player ever with 5 straight seasons of 30 homers, 100 RBIs, 100 runs scored, and a 300 batting average. The others, some of them, Ruth, Garrick, and Fox. No brainer. He's a Hall of Famer. The other 3 are a little tricky. I would put Schilling in. Love the postseason on a bad team. He's got black type by his name. He was top 3 in his Cy Young voting at least 3 times. A couple times. He won with the '04 Red Sox. He won a championship with the Diamondbacks. He won 2 titles. He beat the Yankees both times in doing so. Remember, he pitched Game 6 against the Yankees. He's 11-2 historically in the postseason. Yes, he's a little shy with the wins at .213, but Curt Schilling, to me, now he's borderline, but I put him in the Hall of Fame. I always thought he was a great big game pitcher, and outside of Smoltz, in my era, in the 90s, and then, of course, early part of the new century. I can't think of too many pitchers in my era, from the 90s on, last 30 years doing sports talk, where I would want the ball in any other pitcher's hands but him. So I would put him in the Hall of Fame. That is 4. I would put Edgar Martinez in the Hall of Fame. Martinez, I have moved along with him. I didn't think this 5 years ago, but he's got black type by his name. He's got a great OPS, on base plus slugging. He won 2 batting championships. He's a tremendous professional hitter. I'm not that wrapped up on the DH. I don't think he's going to make it, but I would vote for Martinez, and I would certainly vote for Jeff Kent. I know Jeff Kent's borderline, but he's got more home runs than any other second baseman in the history of baseball. He won an MVP. He's got 8 straight years of 100 RBIs or more. And believe me when I tell you, when you hear people say he couldn't play defense at second base, between 1997 and 2002, when I got the DirecTV bills and my and bloodshot eyes to prove it, I saw Jeff Kent play every big game that he played with the Giants. Every big game in a 6-year period. Every single one. You are talking 130 games a year. Not to mention many of them in the postseason live. I can't think of one game in my life where Jeff Kent's defense lost the Giants an important game. Not one. Those are my 6. We continue. Mad Dog Unleashed.